Yeah, I deal myself in my own work more with the skills that young students are learning
Yeah.
to prepare them for the future. And of course, this is one of the things that they have to think about we call that entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
But we mean actually by that artistic entrepreneurship. How do you communicate by other means than just the playing?
Yeah, exactly.
How can you use the setting? How can you use the format to communicate and to reach audiences? But the other aspect, of course, of the musician is what you learn to do. We also teach them how to speak in public because we think it's important that they, even if they don't always do that, that they are capable of stepping out on the stage and speaking to their audience, and not only playing for them. And so it's actually the idea is that the skills that they learn are not only different in terms of being able to speak the musical language, but also in terms of communication with their audience, broader style, mastery of styles, being able to perform in different settings, which also means for a lot of musicians that's very, very difficult. If you suddenly are on stage and everybody's standing around the piano, and then you have to play. I mean, that's if you're not used to doing that, that's something you have to learn. So we're trying to teach students a broader set of skills, and in particular the skills that are much more related to what other musicians like jazz musicians and 18th century musicians mastered before us, and in terms of oratory, what people were able of doing to do in the until the 19th century. So that's kind of where we're going.
The one thing I would add to that is that I believe that there's still, it depends on where you are. There's in Northern Europe, we're a lot further thinking about certain things in a different way than, for instance, in Vienna still, or Southern Europe or Eastern Europe. I had last year, actually, I had a job interview in Vienna at a conservatory, and that was exactly about I had to make a presentation which was exactly about a lot of these things. And one of my ideas was that they have 10 piano classes there, and this is not like just some private conservatory. That's not the Hochschule, but it's very good. They're all training to be professional pianists. So you've got 10 piano classes, each of them with at least 10 students. So you've got 100 young pianists there. And there were actually in the jury, afterwards we had a discussion, and there were some student representatives. And the first question the student representative asked me whether I would send a student, because I made a presentation also about Beethoven Moonlight Sonata, about some performance practice aspects about it. And I changed a lot around of like how it could be performed. And my whole idea was just like, I want to give this to you. I want to present you with a couple of facts that make you maybe rethink like what you're doing, and open up the perspective of like, hey, it could be done like that as well. As a student, I think you should be interested in something new, and that was the idea behind it. But the question that came was like, would you send a student like that to play in a competition? And if young people nowadays at the conservatory really still believe that competitions are like, I mean, I know competitions work for some people, but it's the nature of a competition that it works only for a select few, and not as an educational concept for a whole group of people, for all students. And one of my ideas was very much that, like what I discovered for myself is that I started as an organist with an interest in early music and historical organs. Perfect. Okay. Now I'm one of 100,000. Just a number. But then I started doing some more organization. So I did the project management degree. And then I developed my other keen interest in filmmaking. And I started making documentaries, or at least so far I have one larger documentary about a historical organ, the Gothic organ in Soest-Ostønnen. And suddenly I found myself a niche where I'm one of 5, one of 10 people maybe in the whole world that does this kind of thing, because I have a very unique combination of things. And that is also where I think that why the question like what role does music play in our world nowadays becomes important again, because that's when we find like what other things do drive us instead of like the pure hyper specialization that goes on. Okay, let's put it that way. I think that a problem we have nowadays also for lots of musicians, and there's actually some research in that direction as well, that many students, once they finish their studies, they have a psychologically rather hard time, because they realize that a lot of the skills when it comes to performing a piece to the utmost high standard is not something that a large market is waiting for. And in the end, there's of course the dream for many people to actually, make a living doing this kind of thing. And for many people, it ends up that a few years after their studies, and in a way that applies to me as well, they start taking additional classes on something, they study something else, or they just learn a practical job that helps them to live. And I think by incorporating this sort of approach into, or the question, to actually ask that question already during the studies, actually, what role do you think does music play in our world, and what role could you play in that part? Where do you see that you can bring actually something to people, rather than just hoping to become famous? There is a tendency that people just want to become famous, even though they don't know how and why and for what. But the main thing is you get famous. And for musicians also, there is, I think, underlying the danger that like the hope or the idea of making it consists of becoming famous, playing your instrument, sort of a dream career. And I think the further we move away from that, the healthier it is, I think.
Yeah. On the other hand, I don't see a big reason to let go of our professional goal of virtuosity. The idea persists that the only way to develop this high level of playing on your instrument is by the way we have been teaching for the last 150 years. I really don't believe in that. I believe that a different way of teaching music and teaching the instrument and approaching the whole field of music does not conflict with the idea of playing an instrument well. I do not believe that Johann Sebastian Bach did not play well, to put it in that way. Yeah, and all the great pianists of the up until the middle of the 19th century were all improvising musicians.
But it depends on what we define as well, because
I believe that they probably made mistakes.
Yeah, like Courtauld did a lot.
Yeah, like we do in normal speeching, and we because we are improvising. We commonly make mistakes. You can't record that and sell it as a CD. Yeah, that's our problem. Yeah. I don't think, and you can't play it at a competition. Yeah, but of course that's not the goal of life, to make CDs and to win competitions. But if you say that playing well is an aesthetic goal, or technically mastering your instrument is a goal of, I see that as quite possible. What I see actually in teaching, and then I'm talking more about the early levels of teaching that we described earlier, is that it goes so slow. While that's not necessary at all, teaching, you can learn to play an instrument, especially something like a piano, which is very easy. You can learn to play that rather quickly.
Right.
But not by the methods that we're using. We're kind of slowing the whole process down by changing it into this idea of playing the notes that are written.
Yeah.
But if you just discard the notes and teach people how to play, how to improvise on their instrument, well, it's actually rather easy. And then, of course, you run into the problem that you then have to teach them how to read if they're going to have access to literature, which is, I think, a separate problem. Literacy I see as a separate problem. I don't see any methods out there to teach people to read, to be perfectly honest. They would still have to be developed.
Yeah.
I developed one for score reading in Groningen. It's quite easy to do, but it's a lot of work. Of course, you can reach a high level of playing.
Yeah.